the latest information about about last night, the attacks, the U.S. attacks on Iran. Somehow they intensified the attacks and looking at the targets in the southern part of Iran, in the western part of Iran. You see the name of cities, even going to Tabriz. In Mahshar is in the southern again, close to the Khuzestan. In the Bandar Abbas is getting hit every time that the United States attacks Iran. Sirik, Chabahar, again in the southern part of Iran, they use HIMARS to attack Behbahan, which is part of the state of Khuzestan at the close to the Iraqi border. They use HIMARS there, and the air defense systems were reportedly activated last night in Tehran, but there were no air attacks on Tehran. No attacks was reported. No hitting or somehow explosions was reported. It was all about the Iranian air defense system trying to do something. We don't know what was that, but there were no impacts in Tehran. And this is the Iranian response. It was on Kuwait, Jordan.
Jordan, yeah, Al-Aqaba.
Yeah, exactly. What's going on, Elijah? And do you see any sort of pattern in the way that the United States is attacking Iran? And what would that be if there is some?
So yes, indeed, we've seen for the 11th night, the Americans are expanding the areas of attack over Iran and concentrating mainly on the coast in the first place to reduce, in their perspective, the possibility of Iran to control the navigation and create less capability of control. What the Americans are unaware of is that Iran maintain a classical army, but also another parallel army, that is the IRGC, using non-conventional method. And I explain. For example, we know that all the army, they have radars deployed along the coast. They have inland radars for other objective, etc. Once these radars are neutralized, like the Iranians are doing with the American radars, then it is difficult to replace them immediately unless they have other spare part or other radars to put in place. And for that, these kind of radars are very expensive. In the case of Iran, and we're talking about the IRGC in particular, I've seen this kind of non-conventional way in my own eyes with the state and non-state actors. So it's enough with a car, four-wheel drive, with a normal radar that is used on boats or civilian radars even, that is many luxurious boat or even normal boat have, depending on the sophistication of the radar. And then it is on a car, and this car has the possibility to have two person, one driving and another one giving the coordinate to the central, where the central is the one hitting these targets, but is not situated on the coast, but inland. And because Iran has more than 12 command and control centers in all over the country, these are as the main centers, but then they have dozens of sub command and control centers that can replace the main one in case damage or destruction. And also they act with very specific instructions they have once the main orders have been given to all these centers and sub-centers. They become completely independent. And unless there is an order canceling the first one, they can all work without being in contact with one another. And each one is responsible, or more than one, responsible on of a specific region or particular chunk, let's say the Strait of Hormuz, for example. For that, you can never degrade or destroy the Iranian capabilities, when Iran is using non-conventional means to control the navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. And then if we go to the navigation per se, tankers need a couple of drones only that can be launched anywhere to hit the tower control or to hit the ship for the ship immediately to understand this as a warning of a higher caliber as a missile surface to surface that can hit the ship in case they do not obey to the Iranian authorities' instructions. And this is what we have seen happening in several occasions in the last weeks when there are ships who responded to the instructions and other ships who did not and they were hit. So basically, blocking Iran from controlling the Strait of Hormuz is impossible. And for the Americans to control the Strait of Hormuz is again an impossible task. So we go to another point here is where all this is going. It's going nowhere because at a certain point, the military will go back to the decision maker and will say, well, this is what we're doing. We are degrading our enemy's capabilities, but we cannot eliminate their capability and they can always have a way to retaliate. We need to do something else. And here are the options the Americans are faced with. The first option, which is not something that Donald Trump would like to take now, because it means that he failed to fulfill his promise to control the Strait of Hormuz, even if he will end up failing, but he needs to try something else. So he will not accept to sit around the negotiation tables as he has done in the first beginning of the war when he's asked Iran a total surrender and a zero enrichment. And then he went down to negotiating with Iran, but then zero enrichment. And then he went down to 3.67 enrichment, but he wants the 60%. And then he went down to, well, actually 60% can be given to a third party like China or Russia. And then he went down, according to the Iranian rejection of every offer, that we keep the 60% in Iran. We're under the control of the IAEA that is going to coordinate with Iran the reduction of the 60% and transformation of the 60% uranium to something that the Americans and the rest of the international community are happy with. But that cannot happen from one day to another. That happened only when Iran is satisfied about other points. And here the dilemma, because Donald Trump is not going to release all the Iranian frozen assets. He is not going to pay the compensation for the war. And he is certainly not going to lift all the sanctions because at the end of the day, for Iran to ask for fees, the Americans can live with that. They can live with the minimum fees, but they need a compensation. So the only solution for Donald Trump now is to compensate. How he can compensate, he has a way to compensate. So the way to compensate now, there is an increased talk about the Pikaxe Mountains that is in Persian are known as Kuekolang Gazla. This is a deeply buried tunnel complex approximately 2 kilometers south of the Natanz nuclear complex that the Americans bombed and the Israelis. So this complex was built around 2020 and it has not been activated so far. But the Americans are telling us that all the centrifuge assembly facilities destroyed at Natanz, this is what they claim, they've been moved to that complex that is hundreds of meters under the ground. And there is also a separate one under the ground enrichment facility at Isfahan, declared by Iran only in June 2025. So the IAEA has not inspected these two locations. However, for Donald Trump to destroy them is impossible. What he can do is close the entry and exit and say, our satellites are above these facilities, as he said to Fordo and Natanz, and then we will not allow anyone to go in and out and then claim a victory over what he's repeating all the time as preventing Iran from having nuclear bomb. That is a kind of victory that Donald Trump will be happy with. Now, with that, I think this is the most feasible plan. However, this is not the end of the dilemma because Iran will continue asking for the removal of the sanctions, for the compensation for the war, and for the lift of all the sanctions, and they want all their frozen asset back. So, how Iran can do that? Again, the leverage of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is going to disturb the navigations in the Strait of Hormuz until all its conditions, or half at least, or part of its conditions are met. It doesn't mean one of the three, no. It's a bit of each one or half of each one. So instead of saying to the United States, we want 24 billion of our own asset now, they would accept with three and then six and then 12, saying that we have in any way the control of the Strait of Hormuz, and then we will disturb the navigation unless our conditions are met. So this is going to be an ongoing saga for Donald Trump without any solution.
Yeah. It's not just about the pickaxe mound that they tried to destroy it before and they bombed it before. And it's they're attacking other nuclear power plants in Iran. And we had it in Darkhun, in the western part of Iran, the province of Khuzestan. They attacked that, and in southern part of Iran last night and the night before, they tried to hit some targets close to the nuclear power plant in Bushehr. And today, the spokesperson of the Iranian Foreign Ministry said that repeated U.S. attacks and threats against Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities not only constitute a flagrant violation of the core principle of the UN Charter, international law, and the relevant resolution of the IAEA Board of Governors, General Conference, and UN Security Council, but also reveal the United States' deep-rooted enmity toward the Iran scientific progress and technological development. This comes with the news that the United States is going or has signed an agreement with Saudi Arabia for 30 years, and they're going to enrich uranium on Saudi soil, and at the same time they're attacking nuclear power plants. What is that? These nuclear power plants, these are civilian projects. These are not related to the enriched uranium, to nuclear bombs, anything of that sort. What are they seeking for? Is that part of the Iranian infrastructures? Is that part of the plan they have for power plants, for bridges, for you know for oil facilities? Maybe the war is getting that far, which would have the retaliations of the Iranians on GCC countries, Kuwait, Bahrain, maybe Saudi Arabia, then Qatar. How do you see that?
Now, if we go back to the time of the Shah and the President Eisenhower in March 1957 with the program Atom for Peace, the Americans brought to Iran in 1967 the first nuclear facility and reactor with 5 megawatt power for research. And the program was far from being a secret program. And this is when Iran signed the NPT agreement in 1968, and the program became peaceful. The Bushehr is 100% civilian program, but it has more capacity to produce electricity and power than the Pickaxe Mountain nuclear facility. The Bushehr it was run by the Russian before the Russian pulled out all the servicemen because they were afraid of being attacked, because it has been attacked by the Israelis in June 2025, and then by the Americans in several occasions within the area of Bushehr. The reactor itself has never been attacked. The problem in attacking that reactor is the contamination of the Gulf country and the water that is shared, in particular with Qatar and the Emiratis and Oman. It is not going to damage only Iran, but it's going to be a minor Chernobyl disaster if the Americans bomb that facility. So what they are doing is they saying to the Iranians, don't anger us further because we can go completely wild and bomb you. And that is always a message that the Americans are sending to Iran for the Iranians not to bomb the carrier, because bombing the carrier it will bring to the Americans the memory of Pearl Harbor, and then they want to use a nuclear bomb on Iran or blow up the Bushehr nuclear plant, which is going to be an equivalent to a nuclear bomb, more or less. Not the same, but the radiation are there, and that's the aim. So I don't think the Americans will bomb these facilities. They are civilian facilities. They are visited regularly by the IAEA prior to the war. Now, there is a problem with the IAEA that the world needs to know. Normally, in the United Nations, these locations that are known to be 100% peaceful with a steady percentage of enrichment uranium that is produced and given to these facilities are protected by the IAEA. And the IAEA should react as it has done in 1981 when Israel bombed Saddam Hussein's facilities, because civilian nuclear facilities are under the protection of the United Nations as long as they sign the NPT agreement and they accept a non-proliferation treaty, so not to go toward nuclear bombs. So what the IAEA did in all the times that the nuclear facilities have been bombed, because Iran facilities like the Bushehr vicinity, but also Fordo, Natanz, and close to Tehran nuclear reactor, that was initially the first research program that was run by Iran for only research purposes. And it is again acknowledged and visited by the IAEA prior June 2025. So it is known that to be a civilian facilities. Even the ones that are suspected to be facilities where there is a higher percentage that also goes within the jurisdiction of the IAEA that need to be protected, because the NPT allows Iran to produce even 90% of enriched uranium as long as the program is not military. So the 90% or the 60%, the current 60%, because Iran has not reached the 90%, but I'm just saying even the 60, and even if Iran goes to the 90%, as long as there are no proof and relevant elements that confirm Iran is actually going toward a nuclear program, all these facilities should be protected. And the IAEA is not protecting, is not saying anything. Rafael Grossi, the general director, not a word about all the nuclear facilities that Donald Trump bragged about obliterating completely. So this is where the problem Iran has with the inspectors, when the inspector complain and then the international or the Western community complains about Iran not being transparent enough, because actually the IAEA is not doing its job properly, because it is Iran and because the one bombing is Israel in the first place, because we're talking about June 2025. And then after that, the Americans in the same month, and in February, we are back, 2026, we are back to the same war. And then again, the nuclear facilities are bombed. So this is the Iranian program, the Iranian nuclear program, that Iran still insists on not going toward the nuclear military program. And if Iran one day decide to go to the nuclear military program, it needs to make several bombs, not one to try, and then that's it, they don't have it anymore. They need to make sure that the world understand that after the first test, it means that Iran has many other bombs to use to deter the West from bombing Iran. But it seems Iran is happy with the Strait of Hormuz, considering it as it's kind of a civilian nuclear weapon, if we want to just to play on the words, that can really impose its will on the world by uh, forcing the world to stand against Donald Trump and ask him to lift the sanctions, meet the Iranian request, and Iran is happy to be transparent as much as the United Nations wants.